Hello and welcome. In this video we're going to talk about books, not just any book. I have a question for you before we start. How many books do you have lying around on your shelves for years? In the attic, maybe in a cellar or a spare room in a closet. Books that were important enough for you to keep, but you haven't even looked at for many, many years. I bet you have a couple. I found a few, not as many as I used to have, and some of them are right here, and I'll mention them to you eventually, because there's a funny story about all this tonight. Now, when I was a child and a teenager, a young adult, I used to read a lot. I used to love books with a lot of history in them and, different places, different peoples. I dreamed of traveling to some of those places, and I used to be absorbed in my reading a lot and loved it always. But between the ages of 30 and 60, things changed dramatically. I became a mother, I had a profession, I had to work to live, I had the responsibility of raising children and keeping a household in shape, and that took literally all my time and energy. So that beautiful, relaxing, long hours of reading were not there anymore, except for a few subscriptions. I was subscribed to National Geographic, Time magazine, and that's the sort of reading I did, very short, quick articles, but not a full book as I used to love. Now in my mid-70s, I'm semi-retired, so I'm going back again to using some of my free, relaxing time to do more reading. And I thought it was a great idea to take a look at the books around on my shelves and the books that I keep away in my study, in my office, and wonder why I have not looked at them anymore. Of course, no time. And now that I have the time, I realize that I am so used to having them and not reading them that I had to stop and think. So I pulled out a few, we have them right here, some of them. And I have decided one afternoon per week or every 2 weeks at the very least. An afternoon where I don't have commitments, I don't have coffee afternoons, I don't have appointments, I don't have shopping to do, and just relax. Take those books with me to my reading corner, grab a coffee or a cup of tea for those of you who prefer tea, and start looking at them. And I was browsing through all of them very quickly, and there are two things that I realized that I find very interesting. The first one is that each of those books has a memory attached to it. Memories of events, places, faces, people I haven't even heard from for ages. Things that happened that suddenly came alive in my mind, and I started recalling things and related to the book, not the content necessarily, but the fact that I have the book for a reason, whether I bought it or was given to me. But there's a very special memory attached to it. And the first one that I'm going to tell you about is the only one that is not really very pleasant, because it started as a nightmare for me. And I was 17 years old in the last year of high school, and I had to finish an assignment. I had to write an essay about Plato's The Republic. Plato is a philosopher. Just about everybody knows about him except me. It took me years to discover him properly. But I had to finish that essay as part of my final exam. And if I didn't, I would not be given my high school degree, my high school certificate. So I started reading the book and I simply hated it. For me, at 17, I was into boys, fashion, parties, my friends, the fun things, sports. But having to sit down and analyze this book, I remember it so complicated and impossible to understand. Eventually, I wrote my essay. Don't ask me how. All I know is that I passed. And that was it. I closed that book. The book disappeared from my life, literally. And I was away from anything to do with philosophy for nearly 40 years. It was a subject that I would run away from just because of this memory. And this is what I recall, the anxiety and the annoying moments I had every time I had to write. And I thought, it was a useless effort. Okay, so that went by. And then what happened, to bring this full circle, was that I have belonged for about 4 years to the University of the Third Age here in Australia. And they have different activities. It's a large group of about 500 of us, retirees between the ages of 60 and probably 100. There'll be all ages, different backgrounds, a very lovely community idea. And they have many social activities, but they also have some cultural activities, interesting talks and presentations by some professionals doing things that are very wonderful to know about, because I'm not familiar with a lot of the things that people do. And it is, it's like food for the mind to hear people talk about what their lives were like and what they did. And for months, I had been trying to get into the philosophy chapter. And you would wonder, well, after Plato, why? Well, it so happens that you probably know that in the last 10 years, there have been all this surge of interest and curiosity about the Stoics and Stoicism. And people in Perth here were even opening courses to practice Stoic principles and to learn about the Stoics and Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus and Seneca. And as I was reading that, now that, 40 years after my school days, I was very curious. And I thought, wow, this sounds very interesting, because these are principles, values that, we are striving to teach our children and to practice in society as well. So, I was very curious. And I decided I wanted to join this philosophy group. Well, I tried for months and it was booked, completely booked, no room for me. And then at the end of January this year, I received an email from the coordinator saying that there was an opening due to a cancellation. Was I interested still to be in the workshop? And I jumped to the opportunity. Of course I wanted to. And it was fascinating. It is just 12 of us, all of elderly retirees, elderly to some extent, 60 years and above, all professionals when we were working, different backgrounds. There are a couple of different culture backgrounds as well. And the group is very jolly and very, very nice to deal with, or to be part of, because we have all these discussions after each session. And these are, interesting aspects of everyday life. Now more than ever, when we have gone through so many changes, socially speaking. Okay, so in the chapter in the workshop from March, at the beginning of March, we get together only once a month because there's a lot of reading and researching to do. And the coordinator said, well, we are planning for the April or May workshop to discuss the ancient philosophers. Particularly, we're going to start with Plato and the Republic. Well, here I am with this new interest in philosophy and stoicism and all this, having to participate in a discussion group in a month about a book that I hated so much. So I went to my shelves, and there it was, kept away in a little corner, pulled it out, started reading it, and I'm finding it now fascinating. So apart from the fact that I discovered that there is a particular memory attached to every book, I'll tell you what else. The other thing I have discovered is that reading those books in my mid-70s, now that I'm semi-retired, is very, very different. It's a totally, completely different experience. I am now able to stop and think when I read some parts that are very interesting. I take notes. I'm even taking notes of the bibliography to get some books that are on the same subject related, to pull them out of the library, because I am discovering this world of deep thinking so entertaining, but at the same time fascinating, especially when I am a baby boomer born in the early 50s, and since then up until now society has changed so much. Family values, social principles, attitudes, inclinations, desires, women, have advanced so much in so many ways. So I thought it is very interesting. I'm going to read them all. I'm going to read all of those and more, probably. Now, I have some notes here because if I don't have notes, it's not that I forget. My memory is okay. It's that my organization is not properly. So I'm a Gemini, therefore I'm all over the place. So I must try not to jump from one subject to another without concluding the first one. You know what I mean. Okay, so that's as far as participating in this philosophy group now is fantastic. So that's my very serious, responsible reading. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll mention some of the other books that I have here, and I'll just tell you a brief short story because I don't want this video to be too long, but why I have them, why I've read them at the time, and why I'm going to definitely read them again. Now it is, my real curiosity at work. What will they feel like at 70 as opposed to reading them when I was 17, 25, in another world? So I'll tell you about it. So here it is. The Republic of Plato. Yes, I'm enjoying the reading very much. It's very deep and very analytical, but it is fascinating to compare how we react and feel about certain social issues when we read this. This is a book written thousands of years ago. It wasn't even, last century. And to think that many of the principles and the eventualities in this book and many other philosophy books are still the foundations of our attitudes and behaviors today is really fascinating. Now, how we apply those is a different story, but they're still there. They are the basis of everything. The way we act, we feel, we react to things, to people, and I am loving it. Now, another book that I have here is called The Rise of the West. Now, believe it or not, I bought this book 50 years ago. I was 24, a newlywed living in Boston, Massachusetts. Boston is a very cultural city, and my husband and I were working at Boston University, and I was working only a couple of days, a few hours as a translator at the university. And in my free time, after I finished work, I used to go to the cellar of the university. They had an enormous room full of books, tables and tables of them, that were not on the shelves of the university library anymore, and they were for sale at incredibly low prices. You know, something like would be something today like $2, $3. New books that were part of the university library, but they were overloaded. And I did find lots of books. I remember buying quite a few of them, and I have given them away by now. Moving from one continent to the other and one country to the next, it was literally impossible to carry all your books. But we did carry some of them, and this is one of them. And this was published in 1963 by the University of Chicago. And it's a fascinating account of how civilization started and how it came to be what it was around 1950. That's when the book finishes, in Western societies. And it is very well written, fascinating, very historical, of course, and I love that. And it goes hand in hand with this book. Now, you probably know this book by Yuval Noah Harari, professor from in Israel, the university. And I discovered this book only about maybe 4 years ago. A lot of people were mentioning it to me, and I thought, let me read about it. And it's what they call a brief history of humankind. I loved it. I think everybody should read this book, and it's related very much to the rise of the West, because it's also an account of the humanity, steps taken by humans from prehistoric times up until modern times today. But Mr. Harari goes even further than the other book. He goes into the future, visualizing what the consequences might be of all of this, and how we're moving very fast into a future that some of us have not even seen yet, but it's there. So I recommend it very highly. Now, another book that I have, I wanted to say something about Sapiens, actually, because it's called A Brief History of Humankind, but it goes from being animals before evolution, okay? It goes through some biblical times and biblical events, then the agricultural revolution, how humankind started to unify, and what brought that unification, money, religion, ambition, power. The scientific revolution is also here. So it's mostly about industrial revolution, scientific revolution, because of all the things that were discovered. And he says here that we even discovered ignorance, how much we didn't know before. Then a permanent revolution, and then it ends with a chapter called The End of Homo sapiens, the human being. Okay? And I found it incredibly fascinating, and it is chronological, so you can advance step by step and start from the moment where when the world didn't have any human beings on it until now. Loved it. So that ties in with Rise of the West very much, but it extends into modern times. And at the same time, Sapiens contemplates a lot of sociological changes and a lot of sociological events. And that brings me to my other book, which is Sociology by Anthony Giddens. Another book that I bought, 30 years ago, when I enrolled in environmental science at the university here in Perth, and that was one of my foundation units. And one of my teachers said, that's the best sociology book you can read. And I became absolutely fascinated by sociology. It's a beautiful subject. It's very historical, but at the same time very much involved with human, interactions. And it ties in with quite a few things that you will read in Sapiens. So in sociology, we analyze here, for example, let me see, I'll tell you exactly. This was published in 1989 for the first time, and I think I bought it, must have been 1986 when I joined university, so quite a bit of time. But of course the book is never going to go out of fashion. It's a narration and a very serious analysis, chapter by chapter, of the organization of us as humans, the problems that we have, how it makes social sense to ask questions and to answer and to debate and to oppose and give your opinion, and how culture is formed, how the individuals interact culturally. And it is very interesting. He talks here about the diversity of cultures, what ethnicity, identity is. And lovely, because these are things we talk about every day. You hear on the news so many things about these subjects, but we don't stop to think, analyze, or brainstorm through them, with friends and other people who might know about them and who might be interested in the same subject as you are. So going deep into these subjects, it is very much an adventure. It's like going on a trip. Now, Giddens goes into socialization, how times change, and therefore humanity interactions have to change and adapt. What happens in childhood, and then how human beings change into adolescence and adulthood, and why, and what are the influences causing all that. He goes into gender and sexuality, social interaction with everyday life chores. Then he goes into organized crime, gender and crime, the prisons, what prisons are all about, and how many different types of prisons and imprisonment. Then he goes into feminist movements, which is very much what's happening here, domestic violence, the structures of power. He talks about all the different types of power, democracy and capitalism and dictatorships, and he studies the wars, the world wars and the small wars that still happen in countries, civil wars in small countries. He talks about poverty and how to organize social groups for a purpose and a meaning. He talks about the military institutions, family and social institutions like marriage and the religion that rules your life. And even though you may be a very good and a human being, or you may be a human being who practices the same things as your neighbor, you still have differences. So he goes into all this, of course, religion, education, communication, the revolutions that have happened in the world, urbanization, the living styles, how we went from the farms to houses, to dwellings, and how all that has had an impact in our lives and transformed us and separate our identities. You hear many times people talk about, the people from the city, are different from rural people. Rural people are more subdued, quiet, hospitable. People from the city are always rushing and always, you cannot even talk to anybody. So those are the subjects content this book contains, and it is fascinating. It is really book. So this is my favorite sociology book, but of course you will find trillions of them in the libraries, in the bookstores, and if you look for advice, people who know about sociology may be able to guide you in the right direction for something very good. Okay, now this is a totally different subject, totally. But many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, this book I bought also about 25 years ago. And it was amazing because I was at the time raising my family on my own, and I had children who were starting high school, and I thought it would be a good book to read, to learn how to budget, to learn how to manage your money in a very simple, uncomplicated manner. And it will help my children to start realizing, the fact about having to be in charge and in control of your finances with a purpose, a future purpose that would allow you to have, a well-lived life, well-settled. And I thought it was really cute, the fact that the author, Robert Kiyosaki, explained how he came from a family where his father was a hard-working man. They didn't have much. They were rather poor, actually. And his best friend, came from a very wealthy family, and his father was very rich. And he became very curious about the fact that why and how did he become wealthy and rich like that, and his father couldn't, as much as he worked. And he used to spend a lot of time with his friend at his place, and this man, his friend's father, started talking to them about to them, and particularly to him, who was asking the questions, all these ideas and principles, to put into practice for a purpose, and guiding him and showing him how to achieve that in a sensible manner for success. And he did. He succeeded. He had very interesting experiences to pass on to others, and that's why he wrote the book. And I loved it. It's very simply written. It's not a financial book by any kind. It's more or less a narrative of his transformation. And it helped my children also to start wondering about a few things and realizing a few things. And hopefully some of it stayed, and they have been able to at least have their financial life in control. But for me it was good as well, because I know nothing about finances. I know the money that comes in and the money that comes out, and why. Don't ask me about statistics, percentages, interest, investments, and the stock exchange, and dividends. No, I'm not numbers people. I am a woman dedicated to languages and history. I love that, and sociology, but nothing with numbers. But the book is very helpful, and it's very entertaining to read, so I would recommend it as well. Now I have here, now going back to heavy subjects that are very interesting. You remember this book, don't you? I found it in my shelf again. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Well, I read it at least 25 years ago. I'm pretty sure that it must have been that. But very interesting, because it's sort of a fictional book in a way, but at the same time it's really based on a lot of the perceptions we have of the new world as opposed to the old world. Okay, so it is very prophetic. It says here, it's one of the most influential books of our century. And somebody here wrote, a journalist wrote in The Observer, a brilliant tour de force, Brave New World, may be read as a grave warning of the pitfalls that await uncontrolled scientific advance. So it's going, of course, into the future of the consequences of what we're doing today, which we don't know and we don't even think about today. Governments make decisions, they give grants, they open doors to one scientific advance after another, and sometimes they do that thinking that they have reached the most fantastic idea for the benefit of the world, and it turns out that it backfires because the consequences, what can happen or what may happen, it could be A, B, or C. Are we prepared for them? So it is really interesting to analyze all this. I just think that anything that triggers my curiosity and keeps my brain rolling is worth reading. However, there'll be more in the future. And I'll show you a couple more before we finish. Yes, another book I found which impressed me very much because of the sadness and the unbelievable things that some people go through in life, and it just makes you wonder, what do I have to complain about? That the water bills are higher, this year, that's all. But this is Anna Frank's diary from the World War, and it says that it's one of the greatest books of the century. She brings herself and her circumstances into an engaged life where she triumphs over history. And it says we cannot, normal human beings like you and I, common living human beings, cannot really even imagine what it must have been like to have a life like that and to go through the things that they went through. And I always think that, God gives you what He thinks you can handle, honestly, because there are people out there so strong, and it teaches you a lot about resilience, belief, faith, and, total determination. And I think it's a lovely book to read, and I would like to read it again because I have forgotten some things about her. And I have a little book here that somebody gave me. It's written by Benjamin Ferencz, Parting Words, 9 Lessons for a Remarkable Life. Now what he does here is he writes about his life, some of his life experiences, and those 9 lessons are conclusions that he thinks that in order to survive and to live your life well despite everything, you can follow them and probably have a very peaceful, satisfying life, according to him, of course. It says here that Benjamin Ferencz was a Jewish immigrant, was a soldier during the Second World War, and was the last surviving prosecutor of the Nuremberg trials. And he was renowned because he always fought for human rights. And as a lawyer, that's what he did. He was all for human rights, for the respect of them. And he shares the story of his life in a way, in a short, it's a very small book. And then he gives you the 9 treasure lessons to follow, as merely as a suggestion for you to look at your life in a different manner and live it in a more satisfactory way. It says, for example, one of them says about stamina. It said, push the rock a little further up the hill. In other words, don't give up so easily. Just keep going, because you'll get there eventually. Some of you get there faster than others, but if you keep pushing, you will prevail. And things like that. And it's, very short chapters. It's a very small book. It's tiny, but it's lovely to read. It's lovely to read, and it just makes you feel lighthearted and wishing to just go ahead and look at your life as it really is. Probably very good when you compare it to others, especially with the horrific things that are happening nowadays. We hear worse things more and more. So reading books like this, it just gives you a pleasure. And then you remember, not long ago, this book, The Secret. Oh, well, this book created a lot of controversy. There were people who were even mocking the book and making fun of it, because it has philosophical foundations to guide you through beliefs such as, for example, being optimistic in life, not giving up so easily, learning to say no when you have to, and a lot of things that are based on facts that we try to teach our own children, that we were taught as children. I remember my father telling me all these ethical things that should be practiced in life to avoid trouble and to not to incommodate other people. And it says, one of the chapters is the power of your mind, and things like that. And people really focus on prosperity, how you have the power of creating your mindset about things in a positive way, with determination and full force belief that you will get there and achieve them. And I don't see anything wrong with that, because if you allow your mind to doubt and to feel insecure and not to have faith in what you want to achieve or do, then I think that's more troublesome than the opposite. I rather think that it would be nice for people to say, oh, she believes she can do anything, instead of saying, oh, poor thing, she's always suffering from lack of confidence. Why don't we help her? What can we do for her? No. I think, life is really an adventure trip, really. So I recommend it because people, it says here, create your day in advance, for example. So I remember seeing a sketch in YouTube or Messenger, I can't remember where. My daughter showed it to me because I was talking about the book, The Secret, and she said, you want to see something? I'm going to show you something. And she showed me this short YouTube video where these two young men were making fun of this book, and just a mockery, really. Oh, yes, close your eyes and think that when I open my eyes, things will have happened exactly as I imagined, because I put all my force into that. And they were very successful. It was very funny, and it made me laugh. But at the end of the day, if you sit and read the book, it makes you think a lot about a few things that are part of our everyday life. We all want to be successful. We all want to be, some of the human beings want to be famous for one thing or another. Some want to be great achievers. Others want to contribute something special to humanity and to do extraordinary things, like being the first astronaut in Mars, eventually, things like that. But we all have our dreams and desires, but it's just the force we put into them. Sometimes convincing yourself that you can do something, that you are quite capable of achieving something, that you don't need any outside forces to push you. Just in your mind, in your spirit, you have the force to drive you there. And I think it's a very positive attitude in life. Now, the last book I have for you, last but not least, is this enormous book by Ken Follett, The Pillars of the Earth, very historical. It is a book, it has 1092 pages, and it tells the story of a man, a gentleman who was the prior of Kingsbridge, a devout and resourceful monk driven to build the greatest Gothic cathedral the world has known. And other characters in the book. It's a spellbinding epic tale of ambition, anarchy, and absolute power set against the sprawling medieval canvas of 12th century England. This is Ken Follett's classic historical masterpiece. You have to read it. If you haven't, it is a book that you will never forget, and it will help you see things that we don't know about, things we never hear about, we don't deal with because it's not part of our world, our lifestyles. So highly recommended as well. And with this, I'm going to leave you to go quickly into your treasure chest and find some books and remember how they came into your life, what they meant, and try to read them again now that you have acquired the experience and you have learned a few new things in life and you have put into practice some things, you have rejected other things, and made yourself a different person in retirement. So I will try to read them all again, all of these books. And I wish you all very peaceful afternoons with your coffee in hand and your feet up, and a happy, gentle reading. And if you can comment what you have been reading, what you discover in your treasure chest, and what is it about, because we all have very different tastes and inclinations when it comes to reading, and I would love to hear about that. So I will see you in the next video. It will be about books, but of a different sort. So stay tuned and come and see us. Have a lovely week. All the best reading to you.